A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. The Curse Awakens. The great hall of Valdoria Castle blazed with torchlight and celebration. Tapestries depicting ancient wolf hunts hung from stone walls that had weathered 3 centuries of storms, while servants moved between long wooden tables carrying platters of roasted venison and honeyed bread. The air smelled of pine smoke and spiced wine, and laughter echoed off vaulted ceilings carved with symbols of the moon goddess. Isabel Silvercrest stood beside the throne, one hand resting on the slight swell of her belly that had only recently begun to show. 3 months. She was 3 months along with the heir to Valdoria, and the kingdom had celebrated for a week when the royal healer confirmed what she had already known in her heart. The mate bond between her and Varian had sung with the knowledge before any physical signs appeared. "My Luna looks troubled." Varian's deep voice rumbled beside her, and she felt the warmth of his hand covering hers. Even through layers of silk and wool, the touch sent sparks of awareness through her skin. The mate bond had not dulled in the 2 years since their joining ceremony, when he had marked her before the entire kingdom, and she had marked him in return. She turned to meet his gaze. Varian Stoneheart was a man who commanded attention simply by existing. At 32 years old, he carried the weight of leadership in the set of his broad shoulders and the assessing intelligence in his blue-gray eyes. Dark brown hair fell to his shoulders, and a well-trimmed beard framed a strong jaw, marked by a single scar from a battle fought before Isabel had known him. He was beautiful, in the way mountains were beautiful. All harsh lines and unyielding strength, yet his touch on her hand remained gentle. "Just tired," she said, forcing a smile. "Your son has decided to make his presence known at the most inconvenient times." "My daughter, you mean?" Varian's lips curved, and the severity of his features softened into something that made her chest ache. He only smiled like that for her, she knew. The courtiers and lords who filled the great hall would have been shocked to see their formidable Alpha King look so unguarded. "We shall see who is correct." She squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the steady presence of him. The mate bond thrummed between them, a living thing that connected their wolves on a level beyond words. She could feel his contentment, his pride, his fierce protectiveness. It made what she suspected even more terrifying, because something was wrong. She had felt it for days now, a creeping weakness in her wolf that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Female shifters carried and birthed children without difficulty. Their wolves protected the unborn, making pregnancy safer for their kind than for humans. Yet Isabel's wolf felt distant, as if a fog had settled between her human consciousness and the beast that lived beneath her skin. "My lord, my lady," Lord Brennan, head of the Royal Council, approached with a deep bow. His gray beard nearly touched the floor. "The hour grows late. Perhaps the Luna should rest? We would not wish to overtax her in her delicate condition." Delicate. Isabel resisted the urge to bare her teeth. She was Luna of Valdoria, marked and bonded to the Alpha King himself. She could shift into a wolf the color of moonlight and run for leagues without tiring. Or at least, she had been able to do so 2 weeks ago. Now, the thought of calling her wolf forward filled her with inexplicable dread. "I am quite well, Lord Brennan." She kept her voice level. "Tonight celebrates my 24th year. Surely I can manage a few more hours before seeking my bed." Before Brennan could respond, the room tilted. Isabel's knees buckled, and only Varian's supernatural reflexes kept her from crashing to the stone floor. His arms came around her, steadying her against his chest, while the hall erupted in concerned murmurs. "Isabel." Varian's voice held a note of command that made her wolf stir weakly. "What is wrong? I do not know." The admission cost her, but she would not lie to her mate. "I feel strange. Disconnected. Fetch the healer." Varian's bark of command sent servants scurrying. "Clear the hall. Now." The crowd dispersed with remarkable speed. No one questioned the Alpha King when he used that tone. Within moments, only Varian, Isabel, and the royal healer remained. The elderly woman approached with practiced calm, her weathered hands surprisingly gentle as she examined Isabel. "There is no fever." The child's heartbeat remained strong. The healer frowned, pressing fingers to Isabel's wrist to measure her pulse. "My lady, have you attempted to shift recently?" "No." Isabel's throat tightened. "Should I? Perhaps not tonight." The healer's expression remained carefully neutral, but Isabel caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. Rest. If symptoms persist, we will investigate further. Varian carried Isabel to their chambers despite her protests that she could walk perfectly well. He laid her on the enormous bed they shared, dismissing the servants who rushed to help. When they were alone, he knelt beside the bed and took her hand between both of his. "Tell me truly," he said quietly. "What frightens you?" Isabel looked into his eyes and saw the same fear she felt reflected back at her. Varian had lost his first mate to an enemy blade during a border conflict. She knew he still visited that mate's grave on the anniversary of her death. She knew he woke some nights reaching for a ghost before remembering Isabel lay beside him instead. "I feel my wolf slipping away." The words came out barely above a whisper, as if she grows more distant each day. Varian's jaw clenched. Pregnancy can affect the wolf's presence. "You know this. This is different." Isabel pressed his hand to her belly, where their child grew. "Something is wrong, Varian. I can feel it in my bones." He said nothing for a long moment, simply holding her as if he could keep whatever darkness approached at bay through sheer force of will. Finally, he kissed her forehead and stood. "I will find answers," he promised. "Whatever this is, we will face it together." After he left to speak with the healer privately, Isabel lay in the darkness and stared at the canopy above her bed. She wanted to believe him. The mate bond between them was sacred, unbreakable. But some instinct, older and deeper than conscious thought, whispered that this was something even an alpha king could not fight. 3 days passed. Isabel performed her duties as Luna with increasing difficulty. The weakness in her wolf grew more pronounced. When she tried to shift in the privacy of their chambers, nothing happened. Her wolf did not respond to her call. The sensation was akin to shouting into a void and hearing no echo return. Varian noticed, of course. He watched her with troubled eyes, but said nothing when she insisted everything was fine. She saw him conferring with the healer, with the council's oldest members, with anyone who might have knowledge of such strange symptoms. None could provide answers. On the 4th night, unable to sleep, Isabel rose from bed and wrapped a heavy cloak around her shoulders. Varian slept deeply beside her, exhausted from long days spent managing kingdom business and searching for solutions to her mysterious condition. She pressed a kiss to his temple, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and winter that clung to him, then slipped from their chambers. The castle slept around her as she navigated familiar corridors by moonlight. Guards nodded respectfully as she passed but did not question where the Luna walked at such an hour. She had freedom here, earned through 2 years of proving herself a worthy mate to their king. The library stood at the castle's eastern edge, housed in the oldest part of the structure. During daylight hours, scholars pored over texts and records. At night, it belonged to shadows and dust. Isabel had spent many afternoons here during her first months as Luna, learning the histories of Valdoria and the bloodlines that had ruled it. But there was another library, one few knew existed. A forbidden collection kept locked behind an iron door that bore no marking save a single silver wolf's head. Isabel had discovered it by accident months ago, while searching for records of a treaty dispute. She had meant to ask Varian about it, but the moment had never seemed right. Tonight, standing before that unmarked door, she knew she would find answers within. Her fingers closed around the cold iron handle. It should have been locked. Instead, the door swung open soundlessly, as if welcoming her. The forbidden library was smaller than the main collection. A circular room with shelves that climbed toward a domed ceiling. A single window admitted pale moonlight that cast everything in silver. The books here looked ancient, bound in leather that had cracked with age. Some bore titles in languages Isabel did not recognize. She moved through the room systematically, searching for anything that might explain what was happening to her wolf. Most texts dealt with battle strategies, old treaties, accounts of wars fought and won. Then her fingers brushed against a volume that felt different from the others. The leather was softer, almost supple, and it had been tucked behind several larger tomes as if deliberately hidden. Isabel pulled the book free and carried it to the window where moonlight made reading possible. The cover bore no title, but when she opened it, familiar handwriting made her breath catch. The personal diary of Adelaide Silvercrest, her grandmother's name, Isabel's hands trembled as she turned pages filled with elegant script. The entries began innocuously. Observations about weather, notes about household management, commentary on court politics. Then halfway through the volume, the tone shifted dramatically. I am to be married in 3 days. Mother grows worse. She no longer recognizes father, no longer remembers her own name. The healers say there is nothing to be done. The curse has taken her completely. Isabel's pulse hammered in her ears. She flipped forward, scanning entries with increasing horror. Mother attacked a servant today. She had to be restrained. Her wolf has consumed everything human within her. Father weeps openly now, caring nothing for who sees his grief. Tomorrow is her 25th birthday. Tomorrow. We will lose her forever. The book nearly slipped from Isabel's numb fingers. 25th birthday. Her grandmother's mother had lost herself at 25. And Isabel would turn 25 in 4 months. She forced herself to keep reading, though each word felt like a blade sliding between her ribs. The curse is real. I have searched every record, questioned every elder who might remember. 8 generations of Silvercrest women, all meeting the same fate. We lose our wolves slowly, then all at once. On our 25th birthday, we transform permanently. No return to human form. No human thoughts. Just the beast, forever. No. Isabel shook her head violently, but the words on the page did not change. Her grandmother's careful script detailed it all. The slow weakening. The growing distance from one's wolf. Then the final transformation that could not be undone. I have 4 years before the curse claims me. 4 years to live as myself before becoming something less than human. I will not tell my mate. Why burden him with the knowledge of what I will become? Better he thinks me dead than watches me devolve into a monster he must eventually destroy. Tears blurred Isabel's vision. She sank to the floor, clutching the diary against her chest. Her grandmother had written those words at 21. 4 years later, she would have transformed. But Isabel remembered her grandmother dying in her bed, surrounded by family, looking peaceful. With shaking hands, she found the final entries. I took the coward's way. When my 24th year ended and I felt my wolf beginning to slip away, I drank wolfsbane tea. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to sicken unto death. My mate believes I suffer from a wasting illness. He does not know I am poisoning myself slowly to spare him the horror of watching me become a beast. In 2 months, I will be gone. Perhaps in death, I will finally be free of this curse. The diary ended there. Isabel pressed her fist to her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to tear free. Her grandmother had killed herself, rather than transform. And now the same fate waited for Isabel. She was 3 months pregnant with Varian's child. The heir to Valdoria grew in her womb, unaware that its mother was cursed. In 4 months, on her 25th birthday, Isabel would transform into a wolf, permanently. She would lose every human thought, every memory, every shred of the woman she had been. Varian would watch his mate become a beast. He would have to destroy her, or lock her away, or watch helplessly as she attacked innocents. And the child. What would happen to the child if its mother transformed? Isabel did not realize she was rocking back and forth until she felt the cold stone floor bruising her knees through the layers of her nightgown. 4 months. She had 4 months to find a solution, or 4 months to decide how to protect the people she loved from what she would become. The mate bond pulsed with sudden alarm. Varian had woken and found her gone. She felt his concern, his confusion, his rising worry. In moments, he would come searching. She could not let him find her like this. Shattered on the floor of the forbidden library with forbidden knowledge clutched in her hands, Isabel stood on trembling legs and returned the diary to its hiding place. She would not tell Varian. Not yet. Not until she had exhausted every possibility for breaking this curse. She would not burden him with the knowledge that in 4 months, he would lose another mate. As she slipped from the library and hurried back toward their chambers, one thought crystallized with terrible clarity. If she could not find a way to break the curse, she would do what her grandmother had done. She would die before transforming. She would protect Varian from that pain, even if it meant breaking both their hearts. The child. The thought stopped her in her tracks. The child would need protection too. Somehow she would have to ensure the baby survived, even if she did not. 4 months. The clock had begun counting down toward an ending Isabel didn't want to accept. Chapter 2. The Sacrifice. 3 weeks. Isabel had 3 weeks to plan her own death while pretending everything remained normal. 3 weeks to memorize every line of Varian's face. To commit to memory the way he smiled when he thought no one watched. To burn into her soul the feeling of his arms around her in sleep. 3 weeks to say goodbye to the life she had built, without anyone knowing she was saying goodbye at all. She moved through each day wearing a mask of calm she did not feel. At meals, she sat beside Varian in the great hall and laughed at the jests of courtiers, whose names she could barely remember. During council meetings, she offered opinions on matters of state that would affect a kingdom she would never see again. At night, she lay in their bed and traced the contours of his sleeping face with trembling fingers. The child in her womb grew steadily. At 3 months, the swell of her belly had become noticeable beneath her gowns. Servants whispered excitedly about the heir, and the castle hummed with preparations for a royal birth that would never come. Isabel felt the baby move sometimes. Small flutters that made her heart crack further with each passing day. Her wolf continued to fade. By the 2nd week, she could barely sense the beast that had lived within her since childhood. Attempting to shift became impossible. The transformation that should have been as natural as breathing simply would not come when she called. She was losing herself piece by piece, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "The hunt takes place in 5 days," Varian said one evening as they prepared for bed. He sat on the edge of their mattress, removing his boots. "The northern forests have been scouted. The game is plentiful this season." Isabel's hands stilled on the laces of her gown. The royal hunt. It happened twice yearly, a tradition that allowed the Alpha King to demonstrate his prowess, while strengthening bonds with the nobles who joined him. She had ridden beside Varian during the last hunt, her wolf singing with joy at the chase. "I may not join you this time," she said carefully. The healer advised against strenuous activity. Varian turned to look at her, concern darkening his features. "Has something changed? Is the child well?" "The child is fine." That at least was not a lie. The baby remained healthy despite everything else falling apart. "I simply tire more easily now. Perhaps I should rest while you hunt." He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. The mate bond thrummed between them, and Isabel had to fight not to lean into his touch and abandon this terrible plan entirely. "You have not been yourself," Varian said quietly. "Do not think I have failed to notice. Whatever troubles you, we can face it together. Together. If only that were true." But Isabel had read her grandmother's diary 3 times now, searching desperately for any hint of hope, any suggestion that the curse could be broken. She had found none. Every Silvercrest woman for 8 generations had transformed on her 25th birthday. Every single one had lost her humanity forever. "I am simply tired," she lied, reaching up to cup his bearded cheek. "The pregnancy affects me more than I expected. Nothing to concern yourself with." Varian did not look convinced, but he kissed her forehead and released her. They finished preparing for bed in silence heavy with words neither spoke. On the morning of the hunt, Isabel woke before dawn. She dressed in riding leathers, lacing them tight over her belly. The clothing would serve dual purposes, appropriate for the hunt and practical for survival in the wilderness that awaited her. She had spent the past weeks gathering supplies in secret. A small pack hidden in the stables contained dried meat, a fire-starting kit, a hunting knife, and a warm cloak. Nothing that would be missed, nothing that would raise questions. She had also stolen a vial of deer blood from the kitchen stores and a coil of thin rope from the armory. The hunting party assembled in the courtyard as the sun broke over the horizon. 24 nobles and their attendants prepared horses and checked weapons. Varian sat astride his massive gray stallion, looking every inch the warrior king he had been before taking the throne. His bow and quiver hung from the saddle, and a sword rested at his hip. He smiled when he saw her approaching. "You changed your mind. I could not let you have all the glory," Isabel said, accepting help mounting her own mare. The horse, a gentle chestnut named Willow, had been a gift from Varian on their first anniversary. Leaving her behind would hurt almost as much as leaving Varian himself. The ride north took most of the morning. The hunting party moved through farmland and villages where people emerged from homes to watch their king pass. Children waved and called blessings. Isabel waved back, memorizing their faces, their joy, the simple beauty of a kingdom at peace. The northern forests began where cultivation ended. Ancient trees rose like pillars holding up the sky, their branches forming a canopy so dense that little sunlight reached the forest floor. The air smelled of moss and rotting leaves and the musk of wild animals. "We separate here," Varian announced once they had traveled deep enough that civilization felt like a distant memory. "Each hunter will take a different path. We reconvene at sunset. Whoever returns with the finest kill wins the day's honors." The nobles dispersed with competitive grins and good-natured boasts. Isabel waited until most had vanished into the trees before choosing her own direction. She guided Willow northeast, away from the main hunting routes, toward the area she had scouted 3 days prior. The region was known for bears. Large, aggressive, and territorial, they represented genuine danger, even to shifters. A bear attack would be believable. More importantly, a body mauled by a bear would be unrecognizable, which meant no one would question why a corpse could not be found. Isabel rode for an hour before finding what she sought. Fresh bear tracks marked the soft earth near a stream. The prints were enormous, belonging to a male bear in its prime. Perfect. She dismounted and tied Willow to a tree, then retrieved her hidden pack. Her hands shook as she opened the vial of deer blood. She had thought through this plan 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, doubt crept through her resolve. This would destroy Varian. The mate bond between them would tear like a wound that never healed. He had already lost one mate. Losing another might break him completely. But what choice did she have? In 4 months, she would transform into a mindless beast. Better he grieve a dead mate than watch her devolve into something that wore her face, but held no recognition in its eyes. Better he remember her as she was now than see her reduced to an animal that had to be caged or killed. Isabel poured deer blood over her torn dress, her riding gloves, the ground around her. She used the knife to cut herself along her arms and hands, just deep enough to add her own scent to the scene. Pain flared bright and sharp, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she still felt something. Pain meant she was still human. She removed her wedding ring, the silver band Varian had placed on her finger while speaking vows before the entire kingdom. The ring was engraved with symbols of the moon goddess, and their pack emblems intertwined. She pressed it to her lips, then dropped it in the dirt near the largest bear print. The blood made it look like it had been torn from her hand. Willow whinnied nervously, smelling the blood and sensing danger. Isabel untied the mare and used the knife to score shallow wounds along the horse's flank. The animal reared and bolted, crashing through the underbrush in panicked flight. Her saddle remained strapped to her back, adding authenticity to the scene. Now came the hardest part. Isabel retrieved the rope and found 2 trees growing close together. She wrapped the rope around both trunks at chest height, pulling it taut. Then she mounted her pack, took one last look at the carnage she had created, and ran. She sprinted directly at the rope, timing it perfectly. The cord caught her across the chest and stomach, knocking the breath from her lungs and sending her tumbling backward. She hit the ground hard, tasting blood where she had bitten her tongue. More blood for the scene, more evidence of violence. Isabel lay gasping for several minutes, waiting for the pain to subside. When she finally stood, she untied the rope and gathered it into her pack, erasing that particular piece of evidence. Let them think the bear had knocked her from her horse. Let them think she had fought desperately before being dragged away to be devoured. The sound of hoofbeats in the distance sent Isabel diving behind a fallen log. She pressed herself flat against the moss-covered bark, hardly daring to breathe. A rider passed within 20 yards, one of the noble hunters following a deer trail. He did not glance in her direction. When silence returned, Isabel rose and melted into the forest like a ghost. She moved north, away from the hunting grounds, away from the kingdom, away from everything she had ever known. Each step felt like tearing away a piece of her soul, but she forced herself onward. By the time sunset painted the sky crimson, she had traveled leagues, Behind her, she knew the hunting party would be gathering. They would notice she was missing. They would search, and they would find the blood, the signs of struggle, the wedding ring lying in the dirt beside bear tracks. Varian would come. He would follow those tracks, rage incarnate, and he would kill the bear responsible. He would search desperately for her body, refusing to believe she was truly gone. And when no trace could be found, he would have to accept that his mate had been torn apart and consumed, her bones scattered through the wilderness. The thought of his grief nearly drove Isabel to her knees. The mate bond twisted in her chest, a physical pain that stole her breath. Part of her screamed to turn back, to run to him, to confess everything. But she knew what waited in 4 months. She knew what the curse would make her become. This was mercy. This was love. This was the only way to protect him from worse pain ahead. Isabel walked until her legs threatened to give out, until darkness made travel impossible. She found a small cave formed by fallen boulders and crawled inside, pulling moss and branches across the entrance. Then, alone in the cold and dark, she finally allowed herself to weep. She wept for the child she carried, who would never know its father. She wept for Varian, who would blame himself for failing to protect her. She wept for the life she was abandoning, the future they had planned together, the simple joy of waking beside someone who loved her. Most of all, she wept for what she would become. 4 months. 4 months until her 25th birthday, when the curse would activate, and she would transform permanently. 4 months to survive alone in the wilderness, hunting like an animal, until the day came when she became one. Days blurred together. Isabel moved steadily northward, toward the forbidden mountains where few dared venture. She trapped rabbits and caught fish with her bare hands, her shifter strength and senses still functional, even if her wolf refused to emerge. She slept in caves and hollow trees, always moving, never staying long in one place. The baby did not grow as it should. At night, Isabel rested her hands on her belly and searched for movements that rarely came. She still spoke to the child in whispers, telling stories of its father, describing a kingdom it might never see. By every human and shifter reckoning, the baby should have been much further along. Yet her body remained at the same early swell, as if time itself had snagged on some invisible thread, right around the day she transformed. Isabel tried not to think about what would happen then. Would the transformation kill the child? Would she somehow give birth as a mindless beast, unable to care for the infant? There were no good answers, only the terrible certainty that something awful waited ahead. On the morning of her 25th birthday, Isabel woke in a cave halfway up a mountain slope. Dawn light filtered through the entrance, painting everything gold. She lay perfectly still, waiting for the transformation her grandmother's diary had promised. Nothing happened. She sat up slowly, examining her hands. Still human, still herself. She reached inward for her wolf and found nothing but silence. The beast that had lived within her was simply gone, as if it had never existed. Relief and terror warred in her chest. No transformation. She remained human, remained conscious. But at what cost? Her wolf had been part of her identity since childhood. Without it, she was incomplete, broken in a fundamental way. Days later, a new horror revealed itself. The baby stopped moving. Isabel pressed her hands to her belly, searching desperately for any sign of life, but felt nothing. Panic consumed her until she realized her own heartbeat remained the only rhythm in her chest. The pregnancy had not ended. It had simply stopped progressing. Frozen. The child was frozen at 3 months gestation, preserved but not growing, as if time itself had halted within her womb. Isabel screamed her anguish into the uncaring wilderness, but no one answered. She was alone. That night, wolves found her. She smelled them first, a pack of wild animals circling her cave. Their growls rumbled through the darkness, promising violence. Isabel grabbed her knife and pressed herself against the back wall, knowing she stood no chance against a full pack without her wolf. The alpha male entered first, larger than any wolf she had seen. His fur was silver gray, his eyes amber and intelligent. He approached slowly, sniffing the air, taking her measure. Behind him, A dozen more wolves waited. "Stay back," Isabel whispered, though she knew they could not understand human speech. The alpha paused, his massive head tilted as if listening. Then, impossibly, she heard his response. Not in words, but in impressions. Curiosity, recognition, acceptance. Isabel's breath caught. This was not the telepathic bond shifters shared with their pack. This was something older, something primal. She was hearing the wolf's thoughts directly, animal to animal, through some strange connection she did not understand. The alpha approached, until his muzzle nearly touched her face. He sniffed her thoroughly, then made a soft chuffing sound. The pack relaxed. One by one, they entered the cave and settled around her as if she belonged to them. Isabel lowered her knife with shaking hands. The wolves pressed close, their warmth driving away the chill. The alpha rested his head on her lap, a gesture of trust and protection. She was not alone after all. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Isabel Silvercrest, former Luna of Valdoria, slept surrounded by wolves. 3 years would pass before she saw another human face. 3 years of survival, of becoming something neither fully human nor truly beast. 3 years of waiting for an end that never came. But tonight, she simply slept, and the wolves stood guard. Chapter 3. The Long Vigil. 3 years changed a man in ways both visible and hidden. Varian Stoneheart stood at the window of his private chambers and watched dawn break over Valdoria with eyes that no longer saw beauty in the light. The kingdom spread below him, villages and farmland arranged in neat patterns, smoke rising from chimneys as people woke to begin their daily labors. They went about their lives believing their king protected them, believing he remained strong and unwavering. They were wrong. The man who stared out that window bore little resemblance to the Alpha King, who had once laughed freely in the Great Hall. At 35, Varian looked a decade older. Gray streaked through his dark hair, concentrated at his temples, and threaded through his beard. Lines had carved themselves deep around his eyes and mouth. His shoulders, though still broad, carried a weight that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with grief. The mate bond had never truly severed. When Isabel died, it had torn rather than broken cleanly, leaving ragged edges that continued to bleed. Varian felt it constantly, a phantom limb that ached regardless of whether he acknowledged the pain. Some nights, he woke reaching for her, his hand closing on empty space where her warmth should have been. 3 years. 1,095 days since he had knelt in the dirt beside bear tracks and found her wedding ring lying in blood-soaked earth. He had killed that bear with his bare hands, torn it apart in a fury that terrified even his most hardened warriors. Then he had searched. For weeks he had combed those forests, refusing to believe she was truly gone, refusing to accept that nothing remained to bury. Eventually, duty had dragged him back to the castle. A kingdom could not function without its king, no matter how that king wished to disappear into the wilderness and never return. "My lord," Lucian's voice came from the doorway. "The council awaits." Varian did not turn from the window. His younger brother had become a frequent presence over the past 3 years, always hovering, always offering advice Varian had not requested. Lucian was 29 now, ambitious in ways that grew more obvious each month. "Let them wait," Varian said flatly. "They grow restless. The matter of succession cannot be ignored indefinitely." Lucian stepped into the room uninvited, his boots clicking against stone. "You are still young. Strong. The kingdom needs heirs, brother. You must take a new Luna." The word slammed into Varian like a physical blow. He turned slowly, pinning Lucien with a stare that had made grown warriors step back. "I have a Luna." Had. Lucien had the decency to look uncomfortable, but he pressed forward anyway. "Isabel is dead, Varian. 3 years dead. The kingdom mourned with you, but life continues. You cannot cling to a ghost." Varian's hands clenched into fists. His wolf surged forward, wanting to teach his brother the price of speaking Isabel's name so casually. Only years of iron control kept him from shifting and ripping Lucian's throat out. "Get out," Varian said quietly. The words held more menace than any shout. Lucian raised his hands in a placating gesture and retreated. "Think on it, brother. The council will not remain patient forever. When the door closed, Varian released the breath he had been holding. His wolf settled reluctantly, still growling at the perceived insult to their mate. Their dead mate, as Lucian so helpfully reminded them. Varian returned to the window. Far beyond the castle walls, beyond the farmland and villages, the northern mountains rose against the horizon. The Forbidden Mountains, where few dared venture. Where Isabel had been killed and consumed, her bones scattered by scavengers until nothing identifiable remained. He should stop visiting her cenotaph. He knew this. The empty tomb in the royal cemetery served no purpose except to reopen wounds that refused to heal. Yet every night, after the castle slept, he found himself standing before that monument. Sometimes he spoke to her. Sometimes he simply stood in silence, trying to feel some echo of the bond they had shared. Tonight would be no different. The council meeting dragged on for hours. Lord Brennan, older and grayer than he had been 3 years ago, droned about harvest yields and trade negotiations. Other lords offered opinions on border disputes and tax levies. Varian listened with half his attention, responding when necessary, but his mind remained elsewhere. And finally, my lord, the matter of royal succession. Brennan cleared his throat nervously. The council believes it is time to consider potential candidates for a new Luna. Several suitable matches could be arranged. No. Varian's voice cut through the hall like a blade. My lord, please be reasonable. You are still in your prime. The kingdom needs... I said no. Varian stood, towering over the assembled lords. This council is dismissed. He strode from the hall before anyone could protest further. Behind him, he heard the murmur of concerned voices, Lucien's among them. Let them talk. He had given them 3 years of efficient governance despite his grief. They would not have his heart as well. The sun had set by the time Varian emerged from the castle. Guards snapped to attention as he passed, but he waved them away when they moved to follow. This was a journey he made alone. The royal cemetery occupied a hill overlooking the castle. Ancient trees surrounded it, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the stars. Isabel's cenotaph stood near the center, a simple monument of white stone carved with symbols of the moon goddess. Fresh flowers lay at its base, replaced daily by servants who understood their king's grief. Varian knelt in the grass, his fingers tracing the letters of her name. 3 years, he said quietly. Everyone tells me to move forward, to take a new mate, produce heirs, forget you ever existed. He laughed bitterly, as if the mate bond could simply be replaced, as if you were no more significant than a piece of furniture that wore out and needed replacing. The wind rustled through leaves overhead, but no answer came. The dead did not speak, no matter how desperately the living wished otherwise. I dream of you, Varian continued. Every night I see you. Sometimes you are laughing, the way you used to laugh when you thought no one watched. Sometimes you are calling for help, and I cannot reach you. I wake up, and the bed is cold, and I remember all over again that you are gone. His voice broke on the final word. Varian pressed his forehead against cold stone and allowed himself this moment of weakness. Here, alone with only the dead for company, he could be something other than the Iron King his people needed. My lord? The voice was female, elderly, and unfamiliar. Varian surged to his feet, hand going to the sword at his hip. An old woman stood at the cemetery entrance, her form barely visible in the darkness. She wore simple traveling clothes and leaned heavily on a walking stick. Her hair fell white and loose around her shoulders, and her eyes caught moonlight in a way that made Varian's instincts scream danger. Who are you? He demanded. How did you get past the guards? I am Alara, the woman said, moving closer with surprising speed, for one who appeared so frail. I am a seer, my lord, and I have come because the dead sent me dreams. Leave. Varian's tone held no room for argument. I have no patience for charlatans seeking coin by preying on grief. She does not rest here. Alara stopped before Isabel's cenotaph, tilting her head as if listening to something only she could hear. The Luna you mourn. She does not lie in this earth. She lies nowhere, Varian said through gritted teeth. Her body was never recovered. Now leave before I have you thrown out. She runs with wolves where the moon touches eternal snow. The seer's eyes had gone distant, unfocused. 3 winters she has survived. 3 winters of becoming something neither beast nor woman. She waits, Alpha King. She waits for you to find her. The words struck Varian like lightning. For 3 heartbeats he could not breathe, could not think. Then fury crashed through him. This woman dared to give him false hope, to dangle the impossible before him simply to earn favor or coin. "Get out!" he snarled. "Guards!" Warriors came running at his shout. Ilara did not resist as they seized her arms. Instead, she reached into her cloak with her free hand and withdrew something that gleamed silver in the moonlight. "Wait!" Varian commanded. His heart had stopped in his chest. The seer held a medallion on a delicate chain. Even from several paces away, Varian recognized it. The design was unmistakable, a wolf's head surrounded by crescent moons, the symbol of the Silvercrest bloodline. He had last seen it around the neck of Isabel's mother during their wedding ceremony. By tradition, it should have been buried with the woman when she died. Where did you get that? Varian closed the distance between them in 2 strides, snatching the medallion from Ilara's palm. The metal was warm, as if recently worn. Where? The Forbidden Mountains. Ilara said simply. I found it 3 days ago, lying on a flat stone near a cave, as if someone had placed it there deliberately, knowing it would be found. Knowing I would bring it to you. Varian's hands shook as he examined the medallion. The clasp was broken, as if the chain had been torn from someone's neck. There were scratches on the silver surface that looked recent. This was not grave goods stolen from a tomb. This was something that had been carried, worn, recently handled. Tell me everything, he demanded. Leave out no detail. Ilara's story was simple. She lived on the edge of the Forbidden Mountains, surviving by gathering herbs and selling healing tinctures to nearby villages. 3 days ago, while foraging, she had found the medallion and experienced a vision so powerful it had knocked her unconscious. In that vision, she saw a woman with golden hair living among wild wolves, half feral but still human. She saw the woman placing the medallion on a stone where it would be discovered. She wants to be found, Ilara finished. But she is afraid. She hides from something worse than death. Isabel died 3 years ago, Varian said, but his voice held less certainty now. I found her blood, her wedding ring, signs of a bear attack. Did you find her body? No, but then how can you be certain she is dead? Ilara tilted her head, her strange eyes seeming to see through him. The mate bond, Alpha King, has it truly severed, or does it simply stretch thin across great distance? Varian's breath caught. He had always assumed the torn, aching sensation was the bond breaking. But what if Ilara was right? What if the bond remained intact, simply stretched and strained by distance, and whatever circumstances kept Isabel from returning? If you lie to me, he said quietly, if this is some trick to manipulate a grieving mate, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Do you understand? I understand. Ilara bowed her head. All I can offer is what I have seen and what I have found. The rest is for you to discover. Varian dismissed the guards and questioned the seer for another hour, extracting every detail she could remember about the location where she had found the medallion. Then he sent her away with coin and instructions to wait in the village. If her information proved true, he would reward her handsomely. If false, well, she would have the coin as payment for giving him a few hours of desperate hope. He spent the night pacing his chambers, the medallion clutched in his fist. This could be nothing. A grave robber's cast-off, picked up by a delusional old woman who saw visions in clouds. But it could also be something more. The mate bond thrummed in his chest, and for the first time in 3 years, it did not feel solely like pain. By dawn, his decision was made. Assemble a group, he told his captain of the guard. 8 of our best. We ride north within the hour. Lord Brennan protested when he heard, My lord, this is madness. A wild chase based on the words of some hedge witch. You cannot abandon your duties for— I can do whatever I wish, Varian interrupted. I am your king. Lucian tried as well, cornering Varian in the armory as he selected weapons for the journey. Brother, Please reconsider. The Forbidden Mountains are treacherous. If something happens to you, the kingdom will survive a few weeks without me, Varian said. His tone clipped. Lord Brennan and the council will govern in my absence. Under the Regency Charter I signed at dawn. He strapped a sword to his hip and slung a bow across his back. You have been training for this your whole life, have you not? Consider it practice for the responsibility you so clearly desire. Something flickered across Lucien's face, too quick to identify. I want only what is best for Valdoria. Then support your king, Varian said coldly, or step aside. The ride north took 5 days. Varian led a group of 8 warriors, all veterans who had served him for years. They traveled quickly, changing horses at villages along the way, pushing hard toward the mountains that loomed larger with each passing day. On the second day, they passed through a farming village, where an old man working his field stopped to watch them pass. Something in his expression made Varian rein in his horse. Have you seen anything strange in these parts? Varian asked. Signs of wolves, perhaps, or unusual tracks? The farmer's weathered face creased with concern. Wolves, aye. Larger pack than usual this winter. But there is something else, my lord. He glanced toward the mountains nervously. My grandson swears he saw a woman running with them. Wild-looking thing with tangled hair and clothes made of pelts. He thinks she was a spirit, maybe, or something cursed. Varian's pulse quickened. When did he see this? 2 weeks past, my lord. Near the old hunting trails that lead into the high country. At each village, Varian asked similar questions. The answers varied, but a pattern emerged. Multiple sightings over the past 3 years of a strange woman living in the mountains. Some called her a ghost. Others believed her to be a witch. All agreed she moved with wolves as if they were her pack. On the 5th day, they entered the true wilderness. Trees grew thick and old, their trunks wider than 3 men standing side by side. The ground rose steadily, and snow appeared in patches despite the relatively mild season. This was territory that belonged to nature, not mankind. My lord, one of the warriors, a tracker named Harvin, knelt beside a stream. Come see this. Varian dismounted and approached. Harvin pointed to marks in the soft mud along the water's edge. Multiple wolf prints, which was not unusual. But among them, pressed clear and distinct, was a single human footprint. Small, barefoot. The stride pattern suggested the human had been walking alongside the wolves, not fleeing from them. How old? Varian asked, his voice hoarse. Fresh, within the last day. Harvin looked up at him with wonder in his eyes. My lord, something is out here. Something that walks with wolves as pack, not prey. They followed the tracks for 2 more days, pushing deeper into the mountains. More signs appeared. A crude shelter made of branches, scraped clean animal bones, a circle of stones that had held a fire, and always, the footprints alongside wolf tracks, never fleeing, always moving together. On the 7th day since leaving Valdoria, Varian stood on a ridge overlooking a valley thick with ancient pines. Somewhere in this wilderness, if the signs were true, if the seer's vision held any accuracy, was the woman the villagers called a ghost. The woman who might be Isabel. For the first time in 3 years, Varian allowed himself to hope. Chapter 4. Recognition. The dense forest of the Forbidden Mountains closed around Varian's expedition like a living thing. Ancient pines reached toward a sky barely visible through their interlocking branches, and the ground lay thick with needles that muffled footsteps. The air tasted of snow and stone, sharp and clean, in a way that reminded Varian how far they had traveled from civilization. We make camp here, he announced as sunset painted the western sky in shades of blood and amber. His 8 warriors dismounted with obvious relief. They had been riding since dawn, following tracks that grew fresher with each passing hour. Human footprints alongside wolf tracks, moving together through terrain that would have killed a normal person within days. Harvin, the tracker, knelt beside a stream that cut through the valley floor. The prints are no more than a few hours old, my lord. Whatever we seek, we draw close to it. Whatever we seek. Varian's jaw clenched. Not whatever. Whoever. If the signs proved true, if hope had not led him on a fool's errand, Then somewhere in this wilderness lived the woman he had mourned for 3 years. The woman who might be Isabel. "Double the watch tonight," Varian ordered. "These mountains belong to predators. We take no chances." His men moved with efficient precision born of years serving together. Fires were built and contained within circles of stone. Bedrolls were arranged with weapons within easy reach. Horses were picketed and fed. Within an hour, they had transformed a patch of wilderness into a defensible camp. Varian stood at the perimeter, staring into deepening shadows between the trees. His wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin, sensing something the human part of him could not quite identify. Danger, perhaps. Or possibility. "My lord, you should eat." One of the warriors, a grizzled veteran named Oswin, offered a bowl of stew. "You have barely touched food in 2 days. I am not hungry." But Varian accepted the bowl anyway, forcing down several mouthfuls to quiet the man's concern. Leadership required maintaining strength, even when every instinct screamed to abandon camp and search through the night. The horses grew agitated as darkness fell completely. They stamped and snorted, pulling against their tethers. Varian rose from his position beside the fire, hand moving instinctively to the sword at his hip. "Something approaches," Harvin said quietly. The tracker had drawn his bow, an arrow already nocked. The other warriors armed themselves with similar speed. 8 shifters, all trained fighters, formed a defensive circle around the fires. Their eyes reflected firelight as their wolves rose close to the surface, ready to defend against whatever threat prowled beyond the light. Varian scented them first. Wolves. Not shifters, but true animals. Their musk thick on the evening air. One wolf would have been concerning. A pack meant potential slaughter. They emerged from the darkness gradually, eyes glowing amber and green in the firelight. Varian counted quickly. 12, 15, 20 wolves, each larger than normal, moving with a coordination that spoke of established hierarchy. The alpha male led them, his silver-gray fur almost luminous against the darkness. "Do not attack," Varian commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Hold position." The wolves circled the camp slowly, assessing. Their body language held no aggression, only careful evaluation. The alpha stopped directly across the fire from Varian, tilting his massive head as if measuring the alpha king against some unknown standard. For several heartbeats, man and wolf stared at each other. Then the alpha's ears swiveled backward, responding to something only he could hear. The entire pack turned as one, facing back toward the forest. Through the morning mist that had begun to creep along the ground came a figure. She moved like smoke through the trees, barely disturbing the undergrowth. Dawn light, pale and uncertain, caught on tangled golden hair that fell past her shoulders in matted waves. She wore clothes fashioned from animal pelts, roughly sewn but functional, and her feet were bare despite the cold. Dirt and old scars marked skin that had once been soft, but it was her eyes that stopped Varian's heart in his chest. Violet, even from 20 paces away, even half hidden behind a curtain of wild hair. Those eyes burned with a color he had only ever seen once before. Isabel. The name escaped him as barely more than a whisper, but in the silence of dawn it carried clearly. The woman froze. Her hand, raised to push aside a low-hanging branch, trembled. She stared at him with an expression that cycled rapidly through emotions. Shock, recognition, longing, and finally, terror. Varian took a step forward, before conscious thought could stop him. The wolves responded instantly, their bodies tensing, growls rumbling low in their throats. The woman shook her head sharply, a gesture of warning that needed no words. "It is you," Varian said, his voice rough with 3 years of grief suddenly demanding acknowledgement. "I buried an empty coffin. I mourned a ghost. But you are here. You are alive." Isabel opened her mouth. No sound emerged. She tried again. And this time a broken noise escaped, neither word nor cry but something desperate and anguished. Tears tracked clean lines through the dirt on her cheeks. Behind Varian, his warriors stood frozen in shock. They knew their king's history. They knew he had lost his Luna to a bear attack 3 years past. Yet here stood a woman who bore an impossible resemblance to the painting that hung in Valdoria's great hall. "My lady," Oswin breathed. "It cannot be." But it was. Varian knew it in his bones. Knew it in the way his wolf surged forward, howling recognition. Knew it in the sudden explosive reawakening of a bond he had thought torn beyond repair. The mate bond slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. 3 years of dormancy shattered in an instant, and suddenly he could feel her again. Her fear crashed over him in waves. Her confusion and desperation battered against his consciousness. Her love, buried deep but still burning, flickered like a candle flame that had somehow survived a hurricane. Varian staggered, dropping to one knee as the intensity threatened to overwhelm him. His chest felt like it was being torn open and stitched back together simultaneously. The bond was not gentle in its reawakening. It roared through him, demanding acknowledgement, demanding recognition, demanding that he accept what his eyes already knew. Across the space that separated them, Isabel had fallen to her knees as well. Her hands pressed against her chest, her mouth open in a silent scream. The wolves surrounded her protectively, but they did not attack. They watched their human packmate suffer through something they could not understand. "Isabel!" Varian forced himself to his feet, though his legs shook with the effort. "Please, let me approach. I will not hurt you. I swear it." She shook her head violently. When he took another step forward, the alpha wolf placed himself directly between them, bearing fangs that could tear out a man's throat in a single bite. "I have searched for you," Varian continued, keeping his voice low and steady, despite the chaos raging through the bond. 3 years. Every day I have mourned you. Every night I have dreamed of you. Tell me what happened. Tell me why you left. Just please, please, do not run from me again." Isabel's violet eyes met his, and in their depths, he saw devastation. She raised one trembling hand and placed it over her heart. Then she pointed at him. The gesture was simple, but its meaning crashed through Varian with terrible clarity. She had left to protect him. Whatever had driven her to stage her own death, whatever had kept her hidden in these mountains for 3 years, she had done it because she believed it would spare him something worse than grief. "What are you protecting me from?" he asked. "What could possibly be worse than believing you dead?" But Isabel had no voice to answer. She rose unsteadily to her feet, and the wolves rose with her. For a moment, she simply stood there, drinking in the sight of him as if memorizing every detail. Then, with a small sound that might have been a sob, she turned and fled. The wolves followed instantly, melting back into the forest as silently as they had appeared. Within seconds, the clearing stood empty except for Varian's shocked expedition. "My lord." Harvin's voice was barely audible. Was that truly— Yes. Varian's hands clenched into fists. His entire body shook with the need to give chase, to shift and run her down, to refuse to let her escape again, but he forced himself to remain still. She had wolves at her command, and she knew this territory far better than he did. A pursuit would only drive her further away. "We establish permanent camp," he announced, his voice carrying command despite the tremor underneath. "Build proper shelters. Hunt for supplies. We will not leave these mountains without her." The warriors exchanged glances, but obeyed without question. They were loyal men who had followed their king into the wilderness on what everyone else had called a madman's quest. Now that quest had proven true, and they would see it through to the end. Over the following days, Isabel watched from the shadows. Varian felt her presence through the bond, a constant awareness of her proximity. Sometimes she came close, near enough that he caught glimpses of golden hair through the trees. Other times she remained distant, though never so far that the bond stopped singing between them. He tried approaching several times. Each attempt ended the same way: wolves blocking his path, Isabel retreating, the distance between them refusing to close. She was terrified of something, and until he understood what, she would continue to run. On the 3rd day, Oswin voiced the question the entire camp had been thinking. "My lord, what do we do? She will not come to us, and we cannot catch her without driving her further into the wilderness." Varian stared at the trees where he had last seen violet eyes watching. The mate bond thrummed in his chest. alive again after 3 years of painful silence. He could feel Isabel's presence even now, hovering just beyond sight, torn between the desire to approach and the fear that kept her hidden. "I go alone," he said finally. "She does not fear me. She fears what I represent. She fears the camp, the warriors, the reminder of everything she left behind. My lord, that is unwise." Harvin protested. "Those wolves will not attack if I pose no threat." Varian began removing his weapons, placing sword and knives on the ground beside the fire. "She commands them. They protect her. If I approach unarmed and alone, perhaps she will finally let me close." His men looked doubtful, but they did not argue further. They had followed him this far. They would trust his judgment now. Varian walked away from camp as the sun reached its zenith. He moved slowly, deliberately, making no effort to conceal his presence. His weapons lay behind him. His hands remained open and visible. Every step announced his intention. "I am no danger. I will not force you. Please, just let me see you again." The bond guided him. It pulled like a compass needle pointing toward true north, leading him through dense undergrowth and over rocky slopes. He climbed steadily higher, leaving the valley floor behind, entering territory where the trees grew sparser and stone dominated the landscape. He found her in a clearing where winter sunlight pooled like liquid gold. She sat on a fallen log, surrounded by her pack of wolves. They sprawled around her in relaxed poses, clearly comfortable in her presence. The alpha male rested with his head in her lap, and her scarred hands moved gently through his fur. Varian stopped at the clearing's edge. "May I approach?" Isabel's head jerked up. She stared at him for a long moment, her expression cycling through fear and longing. Finally, slowly, she nodded. He crossed the space between them with careful, measured steps. The wolves tracked his movement but did not rise. When he reached her, close enough to touch, close enough to see the tears gathering in her eyes, he sank to his knees in the grass. "I do not understand," he said quietly, "but I do not need to. Not yet. Just let me stay. Let me sit beside you. We do not have to speak. We do not have to explain anything. Just please, do not send me away." Isabel's hand reached out, trembling, and touched his face. Her fingers traced the new lines grief had carved around his eyes, the gray that had appeared in his hair. She made a sound that might have been his name, though it emerged broken and barely recognizable. "I know," he whispered, covering her hand with his own. The mate bond sang at the contact. Finally complete again after 3 years of agonizing incompleteness. "I know. Whatever it is, we will face it together. I promise you. Together." For the first time since she had fled 3 years ago, Isabel leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. And in that moment, kneeling in a mountain clearing surrounded by wolves, Varian allowed himself to believe that perhaps, somehow, they might find their way back to each other after all. Chapter 5. The Truth Revealed. 10 days had passed since Varian first knelt in that mountain clearing and touched Isabel's face. 10 days of careful, patient visits, where he sat beside her in silence while wolves watched with amber eyes. 10 days of slowly rebuilding trust that had shattered 3 years ago. She had not spoken once. At first, Varian assumed trauma or choice kept her silent, but as the days accumulated, as he watched her struggle to form even the simplest sounds, a more terrible truth began to emerge. Isabel had not chosen silence. She had lost the ability to break it. The realization struck him on the morning of the 11th day. He found her in the same clearing as always, surrounded by her pack. When he approached, she gestured frantically at a rabbit one of the wolves had brought her, then at him, her face desperate with the need to communicate. But when she opened her mouth, only broken sounds emerged, syllables that held no meaning, fragments of language that refused to coalesce into words. "You cannot speak," Varian said quietly, settling onto the fallen log beside her. "Can you?" Isabel's expression crumbled. She shook her head, tears spilling down cheeks weathered by 3 years of mountain living. Her hands moved to her throat, pressing as if she could somehow force words through sheer will. Nothing came. Varian's chest tightened. He had imagined their reunion 1,000 different ways during those 3 years of mourning. In every version, she explained. She told him why she left, what drove her to stage her own death, what kept her hidden in these mountains. He would understand, forgive, and bring her home where she belonged. He had never imagined she might lack the voice to explain it all. "Then show me," he said, taking her scarred hands in his. "However you can. Draw it, gesture it, make me understand. Please, Isabel. I need to know why." She stared at him for a long moment, those violet eyes searching his face as if memorizing features she had not seen in years. Finally, she pulled her hands free and knelt on the ground. Her fingers began moving through the dirt, drawing with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to communicate this way, out of desperate necessity. The first image she created was simple. A wolf in mid-transformation, caught between beast and human. Varian recognized the symbol immediately. Every shifter knew that moment of change, the fluid shift from one form to another. But Isabel's second drawing showed something different. A human figure that remained human, no transformation occurring. She drew the figure again and again, each iteration showing increasing distress. Then she drew a skull. "Death?" Varian asked, confused. "You were dying?" Isabel shook her head violently. She added details to the human figure, giving it long hair, a swollen belly indicating pregnancy. Then she drew the transformation symbol again, but this time the wolf remained a wolf. No return to human form. Permanent. Understanding crashed through Varian like ice water. You were going to transform. Permanently. And you could not stop it. Isabel nodded, relief flooding her features at finally being understood. She drew more symbols, working quickly now. A calendar showing months passing. The human figure's belly growing larger. Then the transformation happening. The permanent shift to wolf form, while the belly remained. "You were pregnant," Varian breathed. His hands shook as he processed what she was showing him. "You were carrying our child, and you knew you were going to transform into a beast that could never return. So you left. You staged your death to spare me from watching it happen." More tears tracked down Isabel's face. She reached for him, cupping his bearded cheek with one hand. The gesture held apology, explanation, and a desperate plea for understanding all at once. Varian pulled her against his chest, his own eyes burning. "You foolish, selfless woman. Did you truly believe I would rather think you dead than stand beside you through whatever darkness approached? Did you not trust me to find a solution? To fight for you? To move heaven and earth if necessary?" Isabel's body shook with silent sobs. Her fingers clutched his shirt as if he might disappear if she released her grip. The mate bond sang between them. No longer just recognition, but communication. Through it, he felt her grief, her shame, her overwhelming relief at finally sharing this burden she had carried alone for so long. They remained like that until the sun climbed higher, warming the clearing. When Isabel finally pulled back, her eyes were red, but clearer. She gestured again, this time pointing to herself, then making a walking motion with her fingers. "You want me to walk with you?" Varian guessed. She nodded, standing and offering her hand. The wolves rose as well, forming their protective circle. But this time, when Varian took her hand and let her lead him deeper into the mountains, they did not growl or bare teeth. They simply followed, accepting his presence as their alpha female had accepted it. Isabel led him for over an hour, climbing steadily higher. They passed her various shelters, crude structures made of branches and pelts that spoke of harsh winters survived through determination alone. She showed him where she fished, where she gathered edible plants, where she had learned to trap and hunt without the aid of her wolf. Then she brought him to a cave halfway up a rocky slope. Inside, protected from weather and animals, lay carefully preserved belongings. Her wedding ring, placed on a flat stone as if on an altar, a piece of fabric torn from the dress she had worn the day she fled, and a small bundle wrapped in leather. Isabel retrieved the bundle with shaking hands and offered it to Varian. He unwrapped it carefully, breath-catching when he saw what lay within. A book, old, leather-bound, filled with handwriting he did not recognize. "What is this?" he asked. Isabel pointed to the name on the first page, then to herself. She made a gesture indicating generations, family, bloodline. Your grandmother's diary, Varian realized. This explains the curse. She nodded urgently. Over the next hour, through gestures and drawings, Isabel conveyed what the diary had revealed. 8 generations of Silvercrest women, all transforming permanently at 25, all losing their humanity to the beast within. Her grandmother had chosen death over transformation, poisoning herself slowly to spare her mate the horror of watching her devolve. But you did not transform, Varian said, struggling to understand. You are still human, still yourself, even if you have lost your voice. Isabel's expression grew troubled. She drew the pregnant figure again, then made a stopping gesture. The pregnancy had halted, frozen somehow, preventing the transformation but also preventing the child from being born. The baby, Varian whispered. Our child is still inside you. After 3 years. She nodded, placing his hand on her belly. It felt wrong, too firm, too unchanging, as if time itself had stopped within her womb. But that was not the worst of it, Isabel's drawings revealed. She pointed to her head, then drew symbols showing degradation. Memory fading, language disappearing, humanity eroding piece by piece, even as her body remained trapped in human form. How long? Varian demanded. How long before you lose yourself completely? Isabel held up fingers. Months for language, though that seemed already in progress. A year for faces, for recognizing those she loved. 2 years for her mind to become fully animal, trapped in a human body that could not transform, could not hunt properly, could not survive as either beast or woman. Horror settled over Varian. This was worse than a clean death. This was a prolonged dissolution of self, a gradual destruction of everything that made Isabel who she was. And she had chosen to face it alone, hidden in these mountains, rather than let him watch it happen. No, he said firmly. No. There must be a way to break this curse. Magic that strong must have a counter. We will find it. Isabel shook her head sadly, pointing to the diary. Her grandmother had searched. So had the generations before her. No solution existed. Then we create one, Varian insisted. I am Alpha King. I command resources your grandmother never had access to. Healers, scholars, mages. Someone, somewhere, must know how to break a bloodline curse. Hope flickered in Isabel's eyes, quickly suppressed. She had given up hope 3 years ago. Allowing it to return felt dangerous, like inviting further heartbreak. A thought occurred to Varian. You said your grandmother searched. But did she seek help from those who practice the darker arts? From witches and blood mages who understand curses from the inside? Isabel's brow furrowed. She gestured uncertainty. The Forbidden Mountains have a reputation, Varian continued. Few venture here because dark things make their home in these peaks. Exiled witches, hedge mages, those who practice magic the kingdom banned generations ago. He stood, pulling Isabel to her feet. If anyone knows how to break a blood curse, it would be them. Over the following days, Varian questioned his warriors about local legends. Harvin proved particularly useful, having grown up in villages near the mountains. The tracker knew stories of an old woman who lived in a cabin hidden deep in the western valleys, a woman people called Morgana Crowfield. They say she was exiled 30 years past for practicing forbidden magic, Harvin explained around the campfire one evening. She cursed a lord who wronged her, made his crops fail, and his animals sicken until he begged forgiveness. The king at the time banished her here rather than execute her, believing death too merciful for such witchcraft. Can you find her? Varian asked. I can try, my lord, though tracking a witch who does not wish to be found. Harvin shrugged expressively. It took 3 more days. Days during which Varian continued visiting Isabel, watching with growing concern as she struggled to maintain even basic gestures. The warriors commented among themselves when they thought he could not hear. Oswin's words particularly cut deep. She acts less human each day, my lord. More animal than woman now. Whatever curse afflicts her, it progresses quickly. Varian saw it too. Isabel's movements had become more fluid, less consciously controlled. She hunted with her pack now, tearing into raw meat without hesitation. When frustrated, she growled rather than attempting sound. The woman he had known, refined and elegant, was dissolving before his eyes. Finally, Harvin returned with news. "I found the cabin, my lord." Followed smoke from a chimney to a valley 2 hours northwest. The witch was expecting us. Varian rode out immediately, bringing only Harvin as guide. They found the cabin exactly as described. A small structure built against a cliff face, smoke rising from a stone chimney, herbs hanging from the eaves to dry. It looked innocent, almost welcoming. Yet Varian's wolf stirred uneasily, sensing power that had nothing to do with shifter magic. The door opened before he could knock. The woman who emerged looked ancient, her white hair falling loose around a face mapped with wrinkles. But her eyes were sharp, green and assessing, missing nothing. "Alpha King," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "You come seeking answers about curses, specifically a bloodline curse that transforms women at 25. Varian's hand went to his sword. "How do you know that?" "I am a seer, among other things." Morgana smiled, revealing surprisingly good teeth for one so old. "I dreamed of a golden-haired wolf who runs on 2 legs. I knew you would come eventually." She stepped aside. "Enter. We have much to discuss, and your mate has little time remaining." Inside, the cabin was cluttered with magical implements. Dried herbs, crystals, bones arranged in patterns that made Varian's eyes ache to examine too closely. Morgana gestured for him to sit at a rough wooden table while she prepared tea. "The Silvercrest curse," she said without preamble. "A nasty piece of work, that one. Blood magic combined with a generational binding. The original witch who cast it knew her craft well. Can it be broken?" Varian demanded. "Everything can be broken, Alpha King. The question is whether you are willing to pay the price." Morgana set a cup before him. "Drink. It will help you understand what I am about to tell you." Varian hesitated, but the mate bond pushed him forward. Isabel was dying by inches. He would risk anything to save her. He drank. The tea tasted bitter, earthy. Almost immediately, his vision sharpened. The patterns on the walls began to make sense. Arcane symbols that spoke of power and sacrifice and transformation. "The curse activates at 25, Morgana explained. "It targets the wolf within, forcing a permanent shift. But your mate did not shift. Do you know why?" "The pregnancy," Varian said. "She was 3 months along when she turned 25. Precisely. The child divided the curse's weight, creating a stalemate. Isabel's wolf died, but her human form remained. The pregnancy froze, preserving the life within, while preventing further development. The fetus remained exactly as it had been at 3 months gestation. The 3 months she had already carried would always count. But no further time could pass for the child until the curse was broken." Morgana's expression grew grave, but the curse did not stop. It simply changed tactics. Now it consumes her humanity directly. Within months, she will forget all language. Within a year, she will not recognize faces. Within 2 years, her mind will be fully animal, trapped in a body that can neither hunt as a beast nor function as a woman. "Then break it," Varian growled. "I will pay whatever price you name." "The price is not mine to set." Morgana leaned forward. "To break a blood curse, you need 3 things. The willing blood of the bonded mate, a sacrifice of equal value to what the curse has taken, and the destruction of the original curse object. In this case, the Grimoire Silvercrest, the book where the curse was first recorded. Fine. Take my blood. I will sacrifice whatever you require, and I will burn this grimoire myself. You do not understand the cost," Morgana said softly. "The curse has taken Isabel's wolf, her voice, and 3 years of her life. The sacrifice must match. You must give half your remaining lifespan. At 35, you might live another 40 years. You must surrender 20 of them. You will age rapidly, grow old before your time, and die young." Varian did not hesitate. "Done. And the grimoire contains protections placed by the Silvercrest bloodline centuries ago. Destroying it will leave future generations vulnerable to the original threat that necessitated such powerful magic in the first place. I do not care about future generations, Varian said harshly. I care about saving my mate. Tell me how to break this curse. Morgana studied him for a long moment. There is one more thing you should know. When the curse breaks, the pregnancy will resume from where it halted. 3 months. Your mate will give birth in approximately 6 months. But the child will carry an amplified version of the curse. It will transform at 13, rather than 25. The words hit Varian like a physical blow. Save Isabel, but condemn their child to an even shorter time before the curse claimed it. An impossible choice. A cruel bargain. But looking into Morgana's ancient eyes, Varian saw truth. This was the price. This was the cost of defying a curse that had claimed 8 generations. How do we proceed? He asked. Morgana smiled grimly. First, you must convince your Luna to accept the ritual. Something tells me she will resist sacrificing your years for her sake. Second, we must retrieve the grimoire Silvercrest. I have it here, you see. I have been its guardian for 3 decades, waiting for the one who would finally attempt to break the curse. She rose and retrieved a book from a locked chest. The leather binding was old, cracked, marked with symbols that seemed to writhe in the firelight. This was the object that had condemned generations of women. This was what stood between Isabel and salvation. Bring her to me, Morgana said. 3 days from now, during the full moon. We will perform the ritual then, or we will watch her fade into nothing. Varian took the grimoire, feeling its weight in his hands. Not just physical weight, but the accumulated suffering of every Silvercrest woman who had transformed, who had lost herself to the curse. He thought of Isabel drawing symbols in the dirt, struggling to communicate as language slipped away. He thought of their child, frozen in time, waiting to be born into a world that would give it only 13 years. I will bring her, he promised, and we will end this curse forever. Chapter 6. Betrayal in the Mountains. Varian returned to the camp with the grimoire Silvercrest clutched against his chest, and a choice that threatened to tear him apart. The ancient book felt heavier than its physical weight suggested, as if it carried the accumulated suffering of 8 generations of cursed women within its leather binding. His warriors looked up as he approached, questions clear in their expressions. Harvin rose from his position by the fire, concern etched across his weathered features. My lord? Did the witch provide answers? She did. Varian's voice came out hoarse. He sank onto a log near the flames, staring into the dancing light without truly seeing it. The curse can be broken, but the price. He explained Morgana's requirements. The blood offering he would give gladly. The destruction of the grimoire posed no moral dilemma, but surrendering half his remaining life, aging decades in a single night, dying young while Isabel lived on, raised questions he had not anticipated, and worse, far worse, was the revelation about their child. The baby would carry an amplified curse, transforming permanently at 13 instead of 25. Saving Isabel meant condemning their daughter to suffer the same fate, only faster, crueler, with even less time to find a solution. What will you do, my lord? Oswin asked quietly after Varian finished explaining. I will break the curse, Varian said without hesitation. Whatever the cost to myself. As for the child, his hands clenched into fists. We have 13 years to find a way to break an amplified curse. Perhaps by then, magic will have advanced. Perhaps someone will discover what 8 generations could not. I refuse to let Isabel fade into nothingness, simply because the future remains uncertain. The warriors exchanged glances but said nothing. They had followed their king into the wilderness on what everyone called a mad quest. They had witnessed him find his supposedly dead mate living among wolves. Whatever came next, they would support him. Varian spent the next day explaining the situation to Isabel. He found her in their usual clearing, surrounded by her pack. She watched him approach with those haunting violet eyes, and the mate bond sang between them, stronger now that they spent time together, rebuilding what 3 years of separation had strained. Using gestures and drawings in the dirt, he conveyed everything Morgana had told him. The ritual, the requirements, The consequences. Isabel's expression shifted from hope to horror as she realized what breaking the curse would cost. When he finished, she shook her head violently and grabbed his hands, pressing them to her chest. Her meaning was clear. She would not accept his sacrifice. She would rather fade away than watch him age decades, die young, leave the kingdom without its rightful king. "It is not your choice to make," Varian said gently but firmly. "You chose for both of us 3 years ago when you fled. You decided alone that protecting me from your transformation was worth more than our bond, our love, our future together. This time, I am choosing, and I choose to save you, whatever the price." Isabel's tears fell freely. She drew frantically in the dirt, showing him a crown, a kingdom, people who needed him. How could he abandon his responsibilities? How could he leave Valdoria vulnerable by shortening his life? "I am 35, Varian said. "Even if I age 20 years, I will still have decades to rule. And our child, curse or no curse, will have a mother who is whole, who can speak, who can teach her what she needs to know before the curse activates. That is worth any sacrifice." They argued through drawings and gestures for hours. But Varian remained unmoved. He had made his decision. In 3 days, during the full moon, they would perform the ritual. 2 weeks passed. Varian wanted to give Isabel time to accept what would happen, to prepare herself mentally for the transformation back to complete humanity. He also needed to gather certain supplies Morgana had requested. Rare herbs, silver chains for the ritual circle, candles made from specific materials. The camp settled into a routine during those 2 weeks. Warriors hunted and fished, maintaining their supplies. Varian visited Isabel daily, and she began spending more time near the camp, her wolves growing comfortable with the presence of shifters who made no move to harm their adopted pack member. Back in Valdoria, however, other plans were taking shape. Lucien Stoneheart sat in his brother's study, reading reports from the spy network he had cultivated over the past 3 years. Most of the information proved mundane: harvest yields, trade disputes, minor border skirmishes. But one report made his pulse quicken. The Alpha King had been spotted in the Forbidden Mountains with a small group of warriors. More significantly, he had been seen in the company of a wild woman who bore a striking resemblance to the deceased Luna. Lucien read the report 3 times, his mind racing. If Isabel lived, if Varian brought her back to the castle, then Lucien's carefully constructed plans crumbled to dust. For 3 years, he had positioned himself as the concerned brother, the loyal advisor, the one who would inevitably inherit when Varian died without heirs. But a living Luna changed everything, especially if she still carried the child she had been pregnant with when she disappeared. My lord, his personal servant, a weaselly man named Torvin, entered the study. "You sent for me? I need you to hire men," Lucien said quietly. "Discreet men, the kind who ask no questions and leave no witnesses. Send them to the Forbidden Mountains with orders to eliminate a small group of warriors and make it look like an accident. Wild animal attack, perhaps. Bandits. I care not what story they construct, only that no one survives." Torvin's eyes widened slightly. "My lord, you speak of killing the Alpha King. I speak of removing an obstacle," Lucien corrected coldly. "My brother has gone mad with grief, chasing ghosts in the wilderness. It is a mercy to end his suffering. And if the woman with him dies as well, then the kingdom is spared the embarrassment of a Luna who lived as an animal for 3 years. As you command, my lord." Torvin bowed and hurried from the room. Lucien stood and walked to the window overlooking Valdoria. Soon, very soon, this would all be his. The throne, the power, the kingdom. He had waited 29 years, living in his brother's shadow, watching Varian receive everything while he received nothing. That was about to change. The assassins reached the mountains 4 days later. 6 men, all experienced killers who worked for coin rather than loyalty. They found Varian's camp easily enough. The warriors made no effort to hide their presence. Smoke from cooking fires marked their location, and guards patrolled in predictable patterns. "We attack at night," the leader, a scarred man named Greaves, told his companions. "Make it look like a pack of wild beasts. slash throats, scatter supplies, leave tracks. The official story will be that the Alpha King died tragically in a hunting accident. They watched the camp for a day, learning its rhythms. They noted when guards changed, when the warriors slept, when the camp was most vulnerable. They also noted the wild woman who appeared periodically, always surrounded by actual wolves. What about her? One assassin asked nervously. Those beasts obey her commands. Kill her first, Greaves said simply. Remove their protection, then butcher the warriors while they sleep. Simple. But nothing about that night would prove simple. The attack came 2 hours after midnight, when the moon hung high and 3/4 full. The assassins crept through the forest with weapons drawn, spreading out to surround the camp. They had orders to kill everyone, leave no survivors who might report what truly happened. Greaves reached the first guard, a young warrior dozing against a tree. His blade slashed across the man's throat before the guard could cry out. Blood sprayed hot across Greaves's hand. 1 down, 7 to go. But the scent of blood carried on the wind, and wolves had better noses than men. The howl that split the night was not human. It was pure animal fury, the sound of a predator protecting its territory. Within seconds, 24 wolves materialized from the shadows, their eyes glowing in the firelight, their lips pulled back to reveal fangs designed for tearing flesh. "Fall back," Greaves shouted. But it was too late. The wolves attacked with coordinated precision that spoke of pack intelligence. They separated the assassins, driving them apart, eliminating the advantage of numbers. One man went down screaming as 3 wolves bore him to the ground, their jaws closing on his arms and throat. Varian burst from his tent, sword already drawn. He assessed the situation instantly. Assassins in the camp, wolves defending, his warriors scrambling to arm themselves. This was no random attack. This was planned, coordinated, meant to look like an accident. "Defend yourselves," he roared, his voice carrying the weight of alpha command. "These are not bandits, they are assassins." The battle turned into chaos. Assassins fought wolves and warriors simultaneously, desperate now to escape rather than complete their mission. Steel clashed against claw, blood soaked into mountain soil. Greaves found himself facing Varian directly. The Alpha King moved with terrifying speed, each sword stroke meant to kill. Greaves was skilled, experienced, but he was just a man. Varian was something more, something ancient and powerful wrapped in human flesh. "Who sent you?" Varian demanded, his blade slicing across Greaves's shoulder. "Answer, or I will make your death last hours." "Go to hell," Greaves spat. Then Isabel appeared. She moved through the battle like a ghost, her wolves parting to let her pass. But it was not her presence that stopped the fighting. It was what she did. She saw an assassin raising a crossbow, aiming at Varian's unprotected back, and she reacted, not as an animal, as a human warrior using tactics, strategy, conscious thought. She grabbed a fallen spear and threw it with perfect accuracy, taking the crossbowman in the chest before he could fire. Varian stared at her, shocked. That throw required human intelligence, human coordination, human strategy. For a moment, despite everything the curse had taken, Isabel had been fully herself. The remaining assassins broke and ran. 2 escaped into the forest. 4 lay dead or dying. Greaves clutched his wounded shoulder, pinned beneath Harvin's boot. "Talk," Varian commanded. "Who hired you?" Greaves remained silent until Varian's hand closed around his throat. The Alpha King's eyes had gone wolf gold, promising violence beyond imagining. "Lucien," Greaves gasped. "Your brother. He paid us to kill you and make it look like an accident." The words hit Varian like a physical blow. His own brother. His blood. The man he had trusted to help rule Valdoria in his absence. "Lucien," he repeated softly. The name tasted like poison. "Why?" "The throne." Greaves wheezed. "He wants the throne. Thought you dead would make him king." Varian released the man and stood, his mind racing. If Lucien had sent assassins once, he would send them again. The mountains were no longer safe. More than that, his brother had committed treason, attempted regicide. Justice demanded a response. "We return to Valdoria," Varian announced to his warriors. Immediately. We have a traitor to confront. Isabel appeared beside him, her hand touching his arm gently. Her expression held question and concern. She understood enough to know something terrible had been revealed. Varian took her hand, pressing it to his chest. My brother tried to have us killed. I must return to deal with him. But I will come back. 3 days, I promise. I will return with Morgana and everything needed for the ritual. Isabel's violet eyes held his for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached up and touched his face. The gesture was tender, accepting, trusting. She pointed toward the path that led back to civilization, then placed her hand over his heart. She understood. She was giving him permission to go, to handle this crisis, to protect his kingdom, and she would wait. 3 days, Varian repeated. Stay safe. Stay hidden. When I return, we end this curse forever. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the wild scent of her, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. Then he forced himself to step away, to mount his horse, to lead his warriors back toward Valdoria and the brother who had betrayed him. Behind him, Isabel watched until they disappeared from sight. Her wolves pressed close, offering comfort. In 3 days, everything would change. Either she would be saved, or she would lose herself completely. She hoped, desperately, that Varian would return in time. Chapter 7. Breaking the Curse. 3 days. Varian had promised Isabel 3 days, and he kept that promise despite the chaos that awaited him in Valdoria. The return journey took 2 days of hard riding, and when the castle finally appeared on the horizon, Varian felt no relief, only grim determination. His brother had committed treason. His own blood had hired assassins to murder him. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. He rode through the gates with his warriors flanking him, ignoring the startled cries of servants and guards who had not expected their king's return. Lucian emerged from the great hall, his expression carefully arranged into concern and welcome. Brother, thank the goddess you have returned safely. We received word of bandits in the mountains and I feared. Silence. Varian dismounted in one fluid motion, his hand going to the sword at his hip. You will speak when I give you permission, traitor. Lucian's mask slipped for just a heartbeat, revealing calculation beneath the concern. Then he recovered, raising his hands in a placating gesture. Brother, I do not understand. What accusations? Seize him. Varian's command sent his warriors forward. They grabbed Lucian's arms, forcing him to his knees despite his protests. Lock him in the dungeons. He will answer for attempted regicide. The courtyard erupted in shocked murmurs. Lords and servants alike stared in disbelief as the king's brother was dragged away, still proclaiming his innocence. Varian cared nothing for their opinions. He had evidence, a confession from the assassin, and most damning of all, his own certainty that Lucian would sacrifice anything for the throne he had always coveted. My lord, Lord Brennan approached cautiously. Surely there has been some mistake. Prince Lucien would never. He hired assassins to kill me in the mountains. Varian interrupted coldly. One survived long enough to confess. Lucien wanted me dead so he could claim the throne. Is that clear enough? Or shall I provide the corpses as evidence? Brennan's weathered face paled. My lord, forgive me. I did not know. No one knew. That was the point. Varian strode toward the castle entrance, warriors falling into step behind him. Gather the council. We convene in 1 hour. And send for Morgana Crowfield. Tell her the Alpha King requires her presence immediately. The next hour passed in a blur of preparations. Varian bathed, changed into clean clothes, and armed himself not just with steel, but with the authority of his position. When he entered the council chamber, every lord rose and bowed. He did not acknowledge them, simply took his seat at the head of the table. This council will address 2 matters, he announced without preamble. First, the treason of my brother. Second, the return of your Luna. The chamber exploded in shocked voices. Return of the Luna? She had been dead for 3 years. Was their king mad with grief? Varian let them talk themselves out, then raised one hand for silence. When he had it, He spoke with absolute certainty. Isabel lives. She has been surviving in the Forbidden Mountains for 3 years, afflicted by a curse I intend to break. I ride to retrieve her at dawn. Any who question this decision may leave this chamber now and never return. No one moved. Good. Varian leaned back in his chair. Morgana Crowfield will perform a ritual to break the curse. It will take place in 3 days during the full moon. Until then, no one speaks of this outside these walls. When the Luna returns, you will show her the respect her position demands. Am I understood? A chorus of agreement filled the room, though many faces showed doubt and fear. They would obey because he commanded it, but winning their true acceptance would take time. Varian did not have to spare. Morgana arrived that evening, riding a mule and carrying a pack that clinked with glass vials. She looked no different than she had in her mountain cabin, ancient and knowing, her green eyes seeing more than they should. "Alpha King," she said with a slight bow. "I have brought everything necessary for the ritual, the grimoire as well, though I see you have already retrieved it from where I left it for you. How did you know I would find you?" Varian asked, as he led her through the castle corridors. "I am a seer. I dreamed of this moment 30 years ago, when I was first exiled to those mountains. I have been waiting ever since for the one who would finally attempt to break the Silvercrest curse." She smiled grimly. "You are not the first to try, Alpha King, but you may be the first to succeed." They departed before dawn, a small group consisting of Varian, Morgana, Harvin, and Oswin. The witch rode her mule while the others took horses, traveling quickly back toward the mountains and the woman who waited there. They reached the clearing, where Isabel had made her home by midday. Varian called out, announcing his presence, and within moments she emerged from the trees. Her wolves surrounded her as always, but they did not growl when Morgana dismounted. Isabel looked worse than when he had left 3 days ago. Her movements were more animal than human. Her eyes held less recognition. The curse progressed rapidly now, consuming what remained of her humanity. They had perhaps days before she was lost completely. "Lady Isabel," Morgana said gently, "I am here to help you, but you must come with us. The ritual requires tools I do not have in these mountains." Isabel's violet eyes moved from Morgana to Varian, questioning. He dismounted and approached slowly, offering his hand. "Trust me, please. One more time. Trust me." She took his hand. The journey back to Valdoria took longer with Isabel walking alongside the horses, her wolves trailing at a cautious distance. When the castle came into view, she stopped, fear clear in her expression. Varian dismounted again and stood beside her. "They will stare," he warned. "They will whisper and judge, but you are their Luna, and I am their king. No one will harm you. I swear it on my life." Isabel nodded slowly and forced herself forward. The courtyard fell silent when they entered. Servants froze mid-task. Guards stared openly. The wild woman, clothed in pelts, surrounded by actual wolves, bore little resemblance to the refined Luna who had disappeared 3 years ago. Yet her face, beneath the dirt and tangled hair, was unmistakably Isabel Silvercrest. "Prepare the East Tower," Varian commanded. "Food, water, clean clothes. My Luna will require them." As if his words broke a spell, people rushed to obey. Isabel was led away by female servants who approached cautiously, speaking in soothing tones. Her wolves remained in the courtyard, restless, but obedient to some unspoken command from their adopted alpha. That evening, the council demanded an audience. Varian granted it, though his patience wore thin. "My lord," Lord Brennan began carefully, "the court is concerned. The woman you claim is Lady Isabel appears changed. There are those who question whether the curse that afflicts her might contaminate the royal bloodline. Some suggest it would be merciful to execute her." Varian's voice could have frozen fire. "Is that what you suggest, Lord Brennan? That I murder my mate because she carries a curse not of her making? My lord, please understand. We think only of the kingdom's welfare. Then think of this." Varian stood, towering over the assembled lords. "The woman in that tower is your Luna. She carries my child, the heir to Valdoria. Any man who speaks of harming her will answer to me personally. And I promise you, my justice will not be gentle." The threat hung in the air like a blade. No one dared speak further. 2 days passed in tense preparation. The tower room was cleared and cleansed. Morgana inscribed symbols on the floor, using chalk mixed with silver dust. Candles were arranged in precise patterns. The grimoire. Silvercrest sat on a pedestal at the circle's center, waiting to be destroyed. Isabel spent those days in her chambers, tended by servants who reported she barely ate, barely slept, and responded poorly to attempts at conversation. The curse consumed her faster now, as if sensing its impending destruction and racing to complete its work. On the night of the full moon, Varian went to her chambers personally. He found her standing at the window, staring at the moon with vacant eyes. When he spoke her name, she did not respond. He had to touch her shoulder before she turned, and even then, recognition took long seconds to dawn. "It is time," he said gently. "Are you ready?" She stared at him, then slowly raised one hand to touch his face. Her fingers traced the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair. Then she placed that hand over his heart and shook her head. A universal gesture. "Do not do this." "I am doing this," Varian said firmly. "You chose to protect me 3 years ago. Tonight, I choose to save you. Accept it." He led her to the tower. Morgana waited inside the ritual circle, her expression grave. The full moon shone through the open roof, bathing everything in silver light. "The Alpha King must offer his blood willingly," Morgana explained as they entered the circle. "Lady Isabel, you must accept his sacrifice. And when I burn the grimoire, you both must hold on to each other, no matter the pain. Do you understand?" Isabel looked terrified, but she nodded. Morgana began to chant in a language older than kingdoms, older than written history. The air grew thick with power, making it hard to breathe. Varian drew his knife and cut across his palm, letting blood drip onto the symbols drawn on the floor. The moment his blood touched the silver dust, it ignited in white flame. "Accept the sacrifice," Morgana commanded. Varian took Isabel's hands, pressing his bleeding palm to hers. The mate bond flared to life between them, no longer just connection but conduit. Through it flowed his life force, his years, his very essence. He felt decades pour out of him like water from a broken vessel. Isabel tried to pull away, her eyes wide with horror as she felt what he was giving up. Varian held her tighter. "No, you do not run this time. Stay with me." Morgana opened the grimoire Silvercrest and began reading from its pages. The words she spoke made reality shudder. Then she threw the book into the flames. It caught instantly, burning with unnatural silver fire that gave off no heat, but filled the chamber with blinding light. The pain hit them both simultaneously. Isabel screamed, the first true sound she had made in months. Her body convulsed as the curse fought against its breaking, unwilling to release its hold. Light exploded from her belly where their child lay frozen, and the pregnancy suddenly resumed. Months of halted development compressed into seconds. Varian aged before her eyes. Gray spread through his hair completely. Lines deepened around his mouth and eyes. His skin loosened slightly. His muscles lost definition. 20 years stripped away in moments, the price paid in full. They collapsed together, still holding each other as the ritual reached its crescendo. The grimoire turned to ash. The symbols on the floor burned away, and finally, blessedly, the pain stopped. Silence filled the tower. Isabel lay in Varian's arms, breathing hard, her body human and whole. She opened her mouth, and this time, words emerged, broken, hoarse from disuse. But words nonetheless. "Varian," she whispered. "What have you done?" "I saved you," he said simply. His voice sounded older now, rougher. "As you tried to save me." Morgana knelt beside them, checking them both with experienced hands. "The curse is broken. Your wolf will not return, Lady Isabel, but your humanity is secure. You will not lose yourself further. And the child," she pressed her hand to Isabel's belly. "The pregnancy has resumed. You will give birth in approximately 6 months." Isabel looked at Varian, at the gray in his hair, the age on his face. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You should have let me fade. You should have—" "Never," Varian interrupted. "In all the world, in all possible futures, I would make this choice again. Do you understand? You are worth every year I gave. You are worth everything." She kissed him then, desperately, gratefully, and the mate bond sang whole and complete between them. Below, in the dungeons, Lucian heard the bells ringing in celebration and knew he had lost everything. The next morning, he was brought before Varian for judgment. "Banishment," Varian pronounced. "You are stripped of your title, your lands, your place in this kingdom. You will leave Valdoria as a rogue, with no pack to call your own. If you return, the sentence is death." Killing Lucian outright would have satisfied the pack's hunger for justice, but it would also have carved his name into every whispered tale of rebellion. Exile cut him off from power, allies, and legacy, leaving him to die as he had lived, alone, scheming in the dark with no one left to listen. It was a cleaner solution, and a warning to any who might mistake their king's mercy for weakness. Lucian was dragged away, still protesting, still claiming innocence no one believed. He would wander alone until some rogue or rival killed him, which was a gentler fate than he deserved. The curse was broken. The traitor was banished, and in the East Tower, Isabel Silvercrest slept in her mate's arms, finally, truly home. Chapter 8. A New Dawn. Isabel woke to sunlight streaming through windows she had not seen in 3 years. For a moment, disorientation clouded her thoughts. Where was her cave? Where were her wolves? Then memory crashed back, and with it came the realization that made her gasp aloud. She could think clearly. Words formed in her mind without dissolving into meaningless sounds. Her humanity had returned, whole and complete, easy. Varian's voice came from beside the bed, rough with exhaustion. "You have been unconscious for 2 days. The healer said you needed rest after what the ritual put your body through." Isabel turned her head and felt her breath catch. Varian sat in a chair pulled close to the bed, and he looked profoundly different from the man she had left 3 years ago. Gray had overtaken his entire head of hair, turning what had been dark brown into silver. Deep lines bracketed his mouth and eyes. His hands, folded on his lap, showed prominent veins and looser skin. He looked like a man approaching his mid-50s rather than 35. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice hoarse but functional. Speaking felt strange after months of silence, like using muscles she had forgotten existed. "Varian, what have you sacrificed for me?" 20 years. He reached out and took her hand gently. "I gave 20 years of my life to break your curse. And I would give 20 more if required. Do not waste energy feeling guilty. I made this choice freely." Tears spilled down Isabel's cheeks. She tried to sit up, and Varian moved quickly to help her, arranging pillows behind her back. The chamber around her was familiar yet foreign, like a memory half forgotten. Her chambers, the ones she had abandoned when she fled. "The baby," she said suddenly, her free hand going to her belly. The swell was still there, but different somehow. "Is it alive and well?" Varian's expression softened into something that resembled his old smile. The pregnancy resumed from where it had frozen. 3 months along. "The royal healer estimates you will give birth in approximately 6 months. 6 months. Isabel tried to calculate how long she had carried this child in total. 3 months before the curse activated and froze everything. 3 years frozen. Now 6 more months. It defied all logic, yet she could feel movement within her womb, small flutters that spoke of life continuing against impossible odds. "There is more you should know." Varian's tone grew serious. "The child will carry the curse. Morgana says it will activate when she turns 13 rather than 25. We will have 13 years to find a way to break it again, to save our daughter from the same fate you endured." The words should have devastated her. Instead, Isabel felt only determination. 13 years was more time than many people received to solve impossible problems. And they would not be alone this time. They had Morgana's knowledge, the resources of an entire kingdom, and most importantly, they had each other. "Then we have work to do," she said firmly. Her voice grew stronger with each word, as if language itself was flooding back into her consciousness. 13 years to research blood curses, to find ancient texts, to consult every witch and mage in the kingdom. Our daughter will not suffer as I did. Varian's expression filled with something Isabel recognized as pride mixed with relief. He had feared, she realized, that she might retreat into despair upon learning their child's fate. But 3 years surviving in the wilderness had changed her fundamentally. She was no longer the refined Luna who had fled to spare others pain. She was someone who had faced death daily and emerged stronger. Over the following weeks, Isabel recovered her strength. Speaking became easier, though she still struggled with complex words and sometimes lapsed into frustrated gestures when language failed her. The healer assured her this was normal given the curse's effects. Full recovery would take time. The court's reaction to her return proved mixed. Some welcomed their Luna back with genuine joy. Others whispered behind their hands about the wild woman who had lived among beasts, questioning whether she could truly resume her duties. Isabel ignored them. She had faced down bears and survived winters that would have killed seasoned warriors. Court politics seemed trivial by comparison. She did, however, make a point of addressing the council formally 6 weeks after the ritual. Dressed in proper gowns that felt constraining after years in pelts, she stood before the assembled lords and spoke with a voice that had learned to command wolves. "I understand some of you question my fitness to serve as Luna," she began, meeting each lord's gaze in turn. "You see someone changed by hardship, marked by survival, no longer the refined lady who once graced these halls. You are correct. I am changed. But I would argue I am better for it." Lord Brennan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Others exchanged uncertain glances. "I have learned what it means to fight for every breath," Isabel continued. "I have learned the value of loyalty from beasts who accepted me when I had nothing to offer. I have learned that survival requires both strength and sacrifice. These lessons will serve this kingdom well, as I resume my duties beside your king." She placed her hand on her swollen belly, now clearly showing at nearly 5 months along. "And when my daughter is born, she will inherit both the curse that afflicts her and the determination to break it. She will know that challenges can be overcome, that curses can be broken, and that love is worth any price. That is the legacy I will give her." The council accepted her words with varying degrees of conviction, but acceptance came nonetheless. Isabel had proven she would not be dismissed or cowed. She was Luna, and she intended to fulfill that role with every ounce of strength she possessed. 6 months passed in a rhythm of preparation and healing. Isabel's pregnancy progressed normally now, the frozen months finally giving way to natural development. She worked with Morgana weekly, learning everything the witch knew about blood curses and how they might be broken or modified. Together, they began assembling a library of texts on curse breaking, determined to have answers ready when Isabel's daughter turned 13. Varian governed with the wisdom age had granted him, though that age had come artificially. He looked older than his years, yet he moved with undiminished strength. The sacrifice had taken time from his life, not his vitality. Isabel caught him sometimes staring at his reflection with an expression she could not quite read. Regret? Acceptance? She never asked, fearing the answer. The first snow fell on a morning in late autumn, transforming Valdoria into something beautiful and pristine. That same day, Isabel's labor began. The birth was difficult, made more complicated by the curse's lingering effects on her body. But Isabel had survived worse than childbirth. She bore down through pain that would have broken others, supported by Varian's steady presence and the healer's skilled hands. As dawn broke over the kingdom, 2 cries filled the chamber. "Twins," the healer announced with wonder in her voice. "My lady, you have given birth to twin daughters." Twins. Not one child carrying the curse, but 2. Isabel felt a moment of panic before Varian pressed the first baby into her arms. The infant had stopped crying, her tiny face scrunched and red, her eyes when they opened showing brilliant blue identical to her father's. "Elise," Isabel said softly. The name came to her without thought, feeling right in a way few things had since her world had fractured 3 years ago. The second baby was placed in Varian's arms. When she opened her eyes, they were violet, Isabel's own rare color, passed down to this tiny life. Freya, Varian said, his voice thick with emotion. Morgana examined both infants carefully, her expression grave. The curse is present in both, she confirmed. Divided between them, which may actually work in our favor. When they turn 13, we will need to perform the ritual for each separately. But we have time to prepare. 13 years. It seemed simultaneously forever and impossibly brief. The kingdom celebrated the birth of the royal twins with feasts and festivals that lasted a week. Nobles who had questioned Isabel's return found themselves swept up in joy too powerful to resist. The Alpha King had heirs. The royal line would continue. That was what mattered. But Isabel made one request that raised eyebrows throughout the court. She wanted the wild wolves who had protected her brought to Valdoria, not captured or caged, but given sanctuary, land in the northern mountains, protected by royal decree, where they could live undisturbed. They saved me, she told the council when they questioned the expense. When I had nothing, when I was losing myself piece by piece. They gave me family. I will not abandon them now that I have everything. The wolf sanctuary was established within months, with Harvin commanding the rangers who patrolled its borders, and Oswin leading the guard posts that watched the mountain pass below. Isabel visited regularly, her daughters bundled against the cold, introducing them to the beasts who had been her pack. The wolves remembered her, the alpha male she had once called Shadow, greeting her with gentle chuffs and accepting the scent of her cubs. More than that, Isabel used her experience to establish laws protecting cursed shifters throughout Valdoria, with seers like Ilara formally recognized as royal allies rather than exiles on the fringes of the realm. Those afflicted with magical maladies would no longer be cast out or destroyed. They would be given sanctuary, support, and every possible resource to break whatever curse afflicted them. It was a radical change in policy, one that earned her both praise and criticism. Let them criticize, Varian said one evening as they stood on their private balcony, watching the moon rise over the kingdom. Elise and Freya slept peacefully in cradles nearby, watched over by trusted nursemaids. You are giving hope to those who had none. That is worth more than the approval of fools. Isabel leaned against him, marveling at how solid he remained despite the silver in his hair and the lines on his face. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. The years you gave up, the youth you sacrificed. Never. His arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. I lost you once and spent 3 years in a grief that nearly destroyed me. I would give 100 years rather than face that again. From the mountains in the distance came the sound of wolves howling at the moon. Isabel recognized Shadow's distinctive voice among them, calling to the pack he led. She had been part of that pack once, neither fully human nor fully beast, surviving in a liminal space between two worlds. Now she stood in her rightful place, Luna of Valdoria, mother to 2 daughters who would face their own battles with curses when the time came. But they would not face those battles alone. They would have parents who understood sacrifice, who had proven that curses could be broken, that impossible odds could be overcome through love and determination. They will be extraordinary, Varian said, following her gaze to where their daughters slept. Our girls, they carry your strength and your determination. When the curse activates, they will face it with everything we can give them, and we will break it, Isabel said with absolute certainty. Just as you broke mine, whatever it costs, we will save them. The wolves howled again, their voices carrying across the distance. A reminder of survival against impossible odds. A promise that family, whether born of blood or formed through adversity, endured. Isabel Silvercrest, who had been lost and found herself again, stood with her mate beneath the moon and knew that their story was far from over. Challenges waited ahead, curses that would demand breaking, battles yet to be fought. But for tonight, in this moment, they had won. They had survived. They had created a future where none should have existed, and that was worth everything. The end.